She said, "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." Everyone around us laughed, and I just forced a smile, keeping my mouth shut. But deep down, I felt a sting I couldn't ignore. When she came back from her so-called weekend away, her key didn't work, and the neighbor told her exactly why. I want to tell you everything that happened, from start to finish, because it's one of those moments you never forget. I've been with Bailey for 5 years. I'm David, hardworking, loyal, a little quiet, and I notice things most people don't. I always thought our relationship was solid. I thought we were a team. Bailey, on the other hand, is ambitious, outgoing, sharp-tongued, and loves being admired. She's the kind of person everyone notices when she walks into a room, and I guess sometimes I loved that about her too. It was a casual gathering with some friends at our place. Nothing fancy, just laughs, drinks, and music in the background. Bailey was in the center of the room, telling a story, and I was trying to enjoy myself. Then she dropped it. The words cut straight through me. "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." The laughter that followed felt like a slap. My face stayed calm, my smile in place, but inside something cracked. I could feel the heat in my chest, the sinking feeling of being humiliated in front of people I cared about. I wanted to say something, defend myself, remind her that we had built a life together, that respect mattered, but I didn't. I stayed quiet. I watched her walk around the room, catching everyone's attention, soaking in the laughs and approving looks. She thrived on it, and I felt invisible. That night, I went to bed angry but unsure how to confront it. Something had shifted between us, and I didn't yet realize how far it would go. I spent the next few days thinking about that moment over and over. I remembered all the little things she used to do that made me feel loved and appreciated, and I noticed how few of them were happening. Every casual remark, every small lie, every bit of indifference started to stack up. And then came the weekend she told me she was going away with her friends. Something about it didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on it yet. Little did I know, that weekend would be the turning point. When she returned, confident and smug, her key didn't work. The neighbor answered her frantic knocking and told her what I had done while she was gone. That's when the reality hit her. Her freedom, her control, her smug smile, all met a quiet but firm wall. I had stayed quiet, yes, but I had been paying attention. And now, everything was about to change. I kept thinking about how things used to be with Bailey. When we first met, she was kind, thoughtful, and always made me feel seen. We'd stay up late talking about everything and nothing, laugh over silly things, and I felt like we really understood each other. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, she started to change. The warmth I once felt began to fade, replaced by sharp words and impatience. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself everyone has rough days. But when I gently asked where she was going or who she'd be with, she'd snap back. "You're too controlling, David. Why can't you just trust me?" It wasn't about control. It was about understanding, about sharing a life together. But she framed it like I was the problem. Each time she dismissed me, a small piece of our connection chipped away. It wasn't just behind closed doors either. At parties, during family dinners, even casual gatherings with friends, Bailey would belittle me in subtle ways. A sarcastic comment here, a cutting joke there, always loud enough for others to hear. I'd sit there, swallowing my words, trying not to make a scene, but inside I felt smaller, less important. I started noticing a pattern. She seemed to get satisfaction from showing me off in ways that made me feel inferior. Her distance became more obvious as time went on. Texts went unanswered for hours. Nights out became longer. Explanations became vague. When I asked about her day or suggested plans for us, she'd shrug, dodge, or give one-word answers. I started piecing together a picture I didn't want to see. The warmth, the attention, the care, it was disappearing, and in its place was a cold, careful distance. One night, it all came to a head. I suggested we spend more time together, maybe a quiet weekend, or even just a few evenings to reconnect. I tried to be calm, understanding, even patient, hoping she'd meet me halfway. Instead, she looked at me with a mix of irritation and boredom and said, "David, I need space. You're suffocating me." Her words hit like a punch I didn't see coming. Space. After 5 years, after everything we had shared, she wanted space. I remember sitting there, stunned, heart heavy, trying to process what I was hearing. It felt like she was rewriting the rules of our relationship without even talking to me about it. The person I thought I knew, the woman I loved, suddenly seemed like a stranger. The cracks I had been noticing, the unease, the tension, the belittling moments, they weren't just small annoyances anymore. They were warnings, signs that the life I thought we were building together was no longer there. That night, I lay awake thinking about how much had changed. I didn't know if she would come back, or if this was just the beginning of a longer distance I couldn't bridge. All I knew was that something had shifted irreversibly, and I had to face it, even if it meant confronting pain I wasn't ready for. Bailey came into the living room one evening, her phone in hand, a bright smile on her face. "Hey, I'm going on a girls' weekend," she announced casually, like it was no big deal. My stomach sank. She had never done anything like this before without including me, or at least mentioning it earlier. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Do you want me to drive you to the airport?" I asked, hoping for a chance to talk during the ride. "No, thanks," she said, brushing me off. "I'll just grab an Uber. It's easier." Her tone was light, almost dismissive, but something about the way she said it set off alarms in my head. I watched her gather her things, noticing her suitcase. It was unusually small for a weekend trip, barely enough for more than a couple of outfits. Something didn't sit right. Usually, she packed like she was preparing for a week, not just a short getaway. The next thing that caught my attention was her clothes. I glanced at the neatly folded outfits she had tossed into the tiny bag. They were dressy, polished, even a little provocative, not what I'd expect for a casual weekend with friends. I frowned, trying to convince myself I was overthinking it, but the uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. As she left, I found myself scanning her texts and conversations more carefully than I ever had. I realized she'd been vague about where she was staying, giving me different answers depending on the day. One moment it was a hotel downtown. The next, it was a friend's apartment she claimed she'd be crashing at. When I casually asked for more details, she brushed me off, telling me not to worry and that she wanted to enjoy herself. But the little inconsistencies kept piling up, each one like a piece of a puzzle I didn't want to see. Even the way she said goodbye felt rehearsed, almost distant. She hugged me quickly, gave me a peck on the cheek, and promised to text whenever she could. Her phone stayed in her hand the entire time, almost glued to her side. My gut tightened. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that this wasn't really about a girls' weekend at all. I spent the next few hours replaying every little lie I had noticed over the past week, the random excuses, the disappearing nights, the vague texts. It all started to make sense, or at least fit a pattern. The details that once seemed insignificant now felt like pieces of a bigger story she was hiding from me. I realized I had to trust my instincts. Something about this trip was not what she was saying. By the time her Uber pulled away, I knew I wasn't imagining it. My chest ached with worry and suspicion, but I felt strangely calm, focused. I had to pay attention, gather details, and prepare for what I might find when this weekend was over. Deep down, I knew Bailey wasn't just with the girls, and I had a sinking feeling that everything I thought I knew about our relationship was about to be tested. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, so I called my friend Mark that evening. Mark's been my rock for years, level-headed, trustworthy, someone who always tells it like it is. I let it all out, pacing around my apartment, voice rising and falling as I described Bailey's strange behavior, the lies about her trip, and the uneasy feeling that had been growing for weeks. Mark listened quietly, letting me vent without interrupting. When I finally paused, he said gently, "David, I don't want to freak you out, but are you sure she's just with her friends? Sometimes people hide things even from the people they love." His words hit me like a splash of cold water. I wanted to deny it, to tell myself he was overreacting, but deep down, I already feared he was right. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at our shared credit card statement. I hesitated, heart hammering in my chest, fingers trembling as I typed in the online account. The list of charges scrolled slowly, each one a tiny punch to my gut. There it was, a hotel in a different city, not anywhere near the area she had told me she'd be staying. The dates matched her weekend away. My hands went cold. Every story she had told, every casual explanation, crumbled in front of me. I sat back, breathing shallowly, feeling the weight of betrayal sink in. My mind replayed all the little signs I had ignored or brushed off. Late nights, vague excuses, evasive answers, and now this. The person I had trusted completely had been hiding the truth from me. It was one thing to feel distant or annoyed, but to find this concrete proof, this undeniable evidence, was a different kind of pain. It wasn't just hurt. It was humiliation, heartbreak, and disbelief all rolled into one. I thought about confronting her immediately, screaming, breaking down, demanding answers. But as the initial shock faded, a strange calm settled over me. I realized that exploding, yelling, or showing my anger wouldn't give me the control I needed. If anything, it would make her think she still had power over me. So instead, I chose silence. I would watch, observe, and plan carefully. I spent the next hours writing down every detail I could remember. Dates, lies, suspicious behavior, the hotel charge. Each piece of evidence was a reminder of what she had done and what I had to do next. The betrayal stung, but it also sharpened my focus. I wasn't going to let emotion cloud my judgment. I had to think strategically, quietly, and decisively. By the time I finally went to bed, exhaustion had set in, but so had clarity. I knew what I had discovered could change everything. Bailey had crossed a line, and I couldn't pretend I hadn't noticed. The betrayal was real, and I had proof. The next steps mattered, how I responded, how I protected myself, and how I regained control over my life. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I was ready to plan. The quiet resolve I felt was stronger than any anger, and I knew it would guide me through what came next. While Bailey was away, I spent the weekend in a strange mix of heartbreak and determination. Every corner of the apartment felt heavier than usual, but I refused to let the weight slow me down. I started by gathering every piece of evidence I could find: texts, receipts, hotel charges, little lies that had piled up over the past week. Each screenshot and printed statement reminded me of what I had been dealing with, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control. I made lists, organized everything by date, and even wrote down the inconsistencies I had noticed in her stories. It was methodical work, almost like preparing a case, but it was also strangely therapeutic. Seeing the truth laid out in black and white gave me clarity. I wasn't just hurt, I was being strategic. I knew I had to act, but carefully, quietly, without letting emotion dictate my moves. Next, I contacted a locksmith. I explained that I needed to change the locks immediately and requested a discreet appointment. While I had no intention of harming anyone, I knew I needed to take back control of my space. By the time the locksmith arrived, I had already mentally planned how everything would go. Locks changed, access revoked, and no confrontation. I wanted the impact to be silent, yet unforgettable. Once the locks were taken care of, I turned my attention to packing. I moved through the apartment calmly, gathering Bailey's belongings into boxes. Clothes, shoes, little keepsakes she had left behind, they all went into neat stacks. I didn't throw anything away. I just consolidated her things so she would have to face the consequences of her actions when she returned. Each item I packed was a reminder of the quiet resolve I felt. I wasn't angry in a reckless way. I was focused, precise, and ready. I also reached out to Mrs. Thompson, our neighbor, who had always been trustworthy and discreet. I explained the situation in simple terms, letting her know that Bailey might show up unexpectedly and that she should be honest if asked, but not get involved otherwise. It was important to me that someone neutral could act as a buffer and ensure things stayed calm, even if Bailey tried to confront anyone. Throughout the weekend, I felt a strange combination of sadness and calm. My heart hurt at the thought of what had happened, but there was no panic, no chaos in my mind. I was clear about my goals and determined to see them through without giving in to anger or impulsiveness. Every step I took, from gathering evidence to preparing the apartment, was measured, deliberate. By Sunday night, everything was in place. The boxes were stacked neatly, the locks had been changed, and Mrs. Thompson knew the situation. I sat on the couch, looking around the apartment that had once felt like shared territory, but now felt like a space I had reclaimed. I was heartbroken, yes, but I was also calm and focused. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt like I had regained control, and I knew that when Bailey returned, she would face the consequences of her actions, quietly, efficiently, and without a word from me. The day Bailey was supposed to return, I kept myself busy but stayed near the window, watching for any sign of her. I didn't feel nervous, just ready. I knew the weekend of quiet planning would pay off soon. When her Uber pulled up, she stepped out, looking exactly like she always did, confident, smug, expecting everything to pick up right where she left off. I stayed inside, out of sight, letting the moment unfold without me interfering. She reached the door and tried her key. It didn't work. She frowned, jiggling it, twisting it, trying again. Her confidence faltered slightly, but she shook it off and tried again. When nothing changed, she knocked. A few sharp, impatient raps at first, then pounding. Her frustration grew with every second. I could see her mouth moving, muttering under her breath, clearly annoyed and confused. Then Mrs. Thompson stepped out onto her porch, leaning casually against the railing. Bailey's knocking didn't seem to faze her. "David moved your stuff out. He knows," she said bluntly, without hesitation. I watched from the window as Bailey froze, the color draining from her face. Her carefully maintained mask of smugness cracked, and for the first time that weekend, she looked truly uncertain. She stared at Mrs. Thompson, blinking rapidly, trying to process what she was hearing. The woman's words seemed simple enough, but the impact was immediate. I could practically feel her mind racing, her panic bubbling up under the surface. She pressed the doorbell frantically, then went back to pounding on the door. Her expressions shifted from anger to disbelief to desperation. It was a quiet but complete unraveling. I heard her phone start buzzing in her hand, and I knew she had tried calling me already. 1, 2, 3 missed calls stacked up on the screen. She kept calling, leaving messages, but I didn't answer. Each ring reinforced my calm. The betrayal had been hers, not mine. I had every right to be silent. The calls became frantic, almost pleading, but I stayed quiet. No words, no explanations, no apologies would come from the window. I watched as she tried to wave down neighbors, asking questions, trying to get any kind of help. Mrs. Thompson stayed firm, answering only when necessary, repeating what I had told her to say. Bailey's face shifted through disbelief, panic, and finally a defeated stillness. Her carefully maintained arrogance had been stripped away in a single moment, leaving her exposed and powerless. I leaned back, letting it all sink in. There was no shouting, no confrontation, no chaos. The revenge was quiet, measured, and absolute. She had expected everything to continue as if nothing had happened, but now she faced the consequences of her choices, her deceit, her lies, her betrayal. And I didn't have to lift a finger. I stayed inside, calm and collected, letting the world reveal the truth to her. Her pounding slowed, her calls stopped, and I knew she was finally realizing she wasn't in control anymore. The quiet satisfaction wasn't about gloating. It was about knowing that the planning, the patience, and the careful steps I had taken had worked perfectly. Bailey had returned expecting victory, but the reality was very different, and she was the only one left to face it. A few days after the lock incident, I didn't expect Bailey to show up at my workplace. But there she was, standing in the lobby like she owned the place. Her expression was a mix of anger, frustration, and disbelief, and I could see the storm behind her eyes. She marched straight toward me, her voice sharp and demanding. "David, I need answers. What is this? Why did you move my things? What are you thinking?" I stayed calm, letting her words wash over me without reacting. I could feel the tension in the air, the stares of my coworkers lingering on us, but I didn't care. I had been waiting for this moment, prepared for every question, every accusation, every attempt to twist the story. I reached into my bag and pulled out the evidence I had collected over the past week. Hotel receipts, screenshots of lies, texts, everything laid out neatly and clearly. I handed the stack to her silently. She glanced at it, eyes widening with a mix of shock and fear, and I could tell she hadn't expected me to be so methodical, so prepared. You went through my things?" she spat out, trying to regain control. "You've been spying on me, tracking me, invading my privacy." I shook my head slowly, keeping my voice steady and calm. "No, Bailey. I've just been paying attention. I noticed patterns, lies, inconsistencies. I wanted to know the truth, and now you have it." I didn't raise my voice, didn't shout, didn't argue. The calmness itself seemed to unsettle her more than anything else could. She waved her hands, pointing at the papers, trying to turn the blame around. "You're insane. You've always been insecure, paranoid. You can't just control everything I do." Her voice was rising, but I stayed composed, letting her fury fade into silence around the edges of my patience. Finally, I looked her straight in the eyes and said something simple but heavy with meaning. "You're free, Bailey. That's what you wanted, right? Freedom." The words hung in the air, quiet but undeniable. I didn't add anything else. I didn't need to. The message was clear. The relationship was over, and my patience, my restraint, and my preparation had made the choice final. For a moment, she stared at me, the evidence still clutched in her hands, and I could see the realization dawn on her. Her eyes flicked around, seeing co-workers, the building, everything. Maybe realizing that her attempts to manipulate or charm her way out of this wouldn't work anymore. The mask of arrogance and control she usually wore had slipped entirely. Then her shoulders slumped, her voice faltered, and for the first time I saw vulnerability in her. It was over. She understood, finally, that I wasn't going to argue, chase, or beg. I had done what needed to be done calmly, quietly, and decisively. The confrontation wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was the stillness of truth, the clarity of evidence, and my refusal to be manipulated that ended it. And in that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of betrayal had been met with quiet strength, and Bailey had no more power over me. After the confrontation, things began to settle into a new, awkward rhythm. Word traveled fast among our circle of friends. I didn't have to tell anyone anything. The story seemed to spread on its own. People who knew both of us started asking questions, whispering behind hands, and glancing my way to see if I was okay. I stayed quiet, letting the facts speak for themselves. The evidence had done its work, and now the truth was out in the open. Bailey, unsurprisingly, tried to spin the story in her favor. She told anyone who would listen that I had been controlling, overbearing, paranoid. But it didn't take long for the receipts, screenshots, and dates to come to light. The proof was clear. People who had once been neutral or sympathetic started to distance themselves from her, some shaking their heads, others quietly saying they had no idea what she had been up to. I noticed friends who had spent time with her during the supposed weekend away now avoided her calls. The tide had turned, and she couldn't manipulate it back. Meanwhile, I started hearing rumors of her own personal fallout. The guy she had been seeing during that weekend wasn't sticking around. He had only wanted a fling. Friends mentioned that he had ended things, not because of her charm or excuses, but simply because he had no interest in anything serious. It was like a ripple effect. Her actions not only destroyed trust with me, but also left her isolated from the temporary thrill she had chased. Every bit of gossip and every secondhand story confirmed what I already knew. The consequences of betrayal can be quiet but relentless. Then came the messages. My phone buzzed repeatedly over the next few days, each notification from Bailey. She apologized, saying she had made a mistake and that she wanted to talk, to explain herself, to try and fix what she had broken. I read a few of them out of curiosity, but I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. No amount of pleading, no explanation, no tearful apology could undo the choices she had made or erase the trust she had shattered. Every message was a reminder of what she had lost, and I had no intention of letting her back into my life. I deleted most of her texts, leaving a handful unopened as a quiet reminder to myself. It was a strange combination of relief and sadness. Relief because I was finally free from the constant lies, the manipulation, and the disrespect. Sadness because a part of me had hoped differently, had hoped we could work through the cracks. But reality had set in. People saw the truth. Friends were choosing sides, and Bailey's attempts to reclaim any semblance of control were failing. In the end, it was quiet. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, no public spectacle. Just her messages left unanswered, the truth circulating among our friends, and a sense of calm settling over me. I was no longer chasing the betrayal, no longer caught in the chaos she had created. The aftermath was simple. Her reputation faltered, her choices caught up with her, and I moved on, unshaken and steady, leaving the drama where it belonged, in her hands. After the storm settled, I realized I needed to focus on myself. I leaned heavily on Mark, who had been there from the beginning, listening without judgment and offering advice when I needed it. My family also became a source of quiet support, checking in, offering encouragement, and reminding me that my worth wasn't tied to someone who had betrayed me. Their presence reminded me I wasn't alone, and slowly, the weight on my chest began to ease. I started carving out time for myself, in ways I hadn't in years. Mornings at the gym became a ritual, not just for physical strength, but for clearing my mind and rebuilding confidence. I ran, lifted, and pushed myself harder than I had before, feeling every drop of sweat as a release of tension, anger, and disappointment. It wasn't instant, but day by day, I began to feel lighter, more focused, more like myself again. Beyond fitness, I returned to hobbies I had abandoned over the years. I dusted off my guitar, started reading books I'd left on the shelf, and even tried sketching again, something I hadn't done seriously since college. Small things, maybe, but they reminded me that life could be rich and fulfilling without being dictated by someone else's actions or choices. I also reached out to old friends I had drifted away from, reconnecting with people who genuinely cared, who didn't judge or complicate life with manipulation or game. The freedom I felt was almost physical. For years, I had been walking on eggshells, careful not to upset Bailey, measuring my words and actions to avoid her sharp remarks. Now that tension was gone. I could speak freely, make decisions for myself, and plan my life without worrying about how she would react. There was still pain, memories, reminders, occasional pangs of what could have been, but it no longer controlled me. The betrayal that once felt unbearable had become a part of my past, a lesson rather than a chain. As I rebuilt myself, I understood something crucial. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud, dramatic, or aggressive. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is quiet. It's living well, walking away, refusing to give them another chance, and reclaiming your own life without them. That realization felt heavier than any confrontation or argument could have been. It wasn't about making her suffer. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above, that I could find peace and happiness without needing validation or closure from someone who had betrayed me. By the time a few months had passed, I felt stronger in ways I hadn't expected. My mind was clearer, my relationships with friends and family deeper, and my sense of self renewed. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had been reshaped into resilience. I was no longer the person who had swallowed humiliation or tolerated dishonesty. I had grown, learned, and reclaimed my life. Quietly, steadily, I had turned the page, and I realized that sometimes that alone is the most devastating and satisfying kind of revenge. Months later, I was walking through a downtown coffee shop, enjoying the quiet morning and the rare feeling of calm, when I saw her. Bailey. She was standing by the counter, waiting for her order, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. She looked different, worn down, her usually confident posture slightly slumped, her face carrying a bitterness I hadn't seen before. It hit me that life had been far less forgiving to her than she expected. She spotted me almost immediately, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before her expression shifted into something she hoped was charm. She took a step toward me, her voice soft but deliberate. "David, can we talk? I just want to explain. I made mistakes, and I want to make things right." I paused, taking in her words, the hesitation in her tone, the tension in her stance. For a moment, part of me remembered the early days, the laughter, the late-night talks, the comfort of shared moments. But that part of me had healed. That part of me had learned. I didn't need to give her space to manipulate or plead. I didn't need to reopen wounds she had inflicted. I stayed calm, polite, letting my voice carry the weight of finality rather than anger. "You were right, Bailey," I said, my tone measured. "We weren't married. So now we're nothing." I watched her face shift, a flicker of surprise followed by the slow realization that I meant every word. There was no negotiation, no room for argument, no hint of compromise. The bridge between us had been burned quietly but completely, and I was standing on the other side, unshaken. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, to beg, to twist the story, but I didn't give her a chance. I turned and walked away, each step deliberate, feeling the sunlight on my back, feeling the freedom I had worked so hard to reclaim. I didn't look back because there was nothing left to see, nothing left to reconsider. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. As I walked down the street, a sense of clarity settled over me. Betrayal cuts deep. Yes, deeper than words can ever capture, deeper than the sudden ache when someone you trust turns against you. But self-respect cuts deeper still. It reminds you of your worth, anchors you in your own strength, and protects the life you've rebuilt. Revenge doesn't always need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is quiet, steady, and internal, living well, moving on, and refusing to allow someone else's mistakes to dictate your happiness. I felt the weight of the past lift, leaving only lessons and growth. I had learned patience, resilience, and the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming my life. Bailey's presence behind me was now just a memory, a reminder of the pain I had overcome and the strength I had gained. And with that, I kept walking, knowing that I had won in the only way that truly mattered, by living my life fully, without her, and without ever looking back. Do you think David made the right choice by cutting Bailey out of his life, or should he have tried to give her another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you think. And if you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one.